Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. Long ago, before mountains had names and before rivers carved their songs into stone, the world was covered in silence. But not an empty silence. It was a silence filled with waiting, a hush beneath the soil, a breath beneath the breeze. The earth, still young and warm, dreamed of forests before forests even existed. And one day that dream began to bloom. From the damp cradle of ancient swamps, something green and slow and full of life began to rise. They were not trees as we know them, not yet. These were strange towers of plant flesh, soft and spongy, lifting themselves toward the pale sunlight. They didn't have leaves, not in the way modern trees do, and they didn't have flowers or seeds, but they had ambition, they had the memory of water. Imagine standing in a forest where the tallest thing is not a tree but a giant rootless fern. The air is thick with moisture, heavy with a warmth that never leaves. There is no birdsong, no mammals rustling in the underbrush, only the breath of plants and the slow unfolding of green upon green. The earth at this time is like a dream, half-formed and breathing through moss. These ancient forests knew the rain like a friend. They leaned toward it, absorbed it, held it in their wide fronds and thick skins. The rain didn't fall in drops, not exactly. It fell in waves, in curtains, in mist so fine they seemed to rise from the ground instead of falling from above. And the trees, if we dare to call them that, began to remember, not with thoughts or feelings, but with the slow, silent memory of survival. When rain touched their skin, they changed. When the sun dried the mud, they remembered to conserve. Deep inside their cells, patterns began to form. Tiny chemical switches opened and closed, like the soft turning of pages in a book written by the weather. In this way, the forest became a kind of mind, not one that thinks like we do, but one that feels in layers of light and shadow, moisture and heat. Every drop of rain was a sentence, and every root was an ear pressed to the heart of the earth. The first great forests of the world didn't just grow, they collaborated. One fern leaned toward another, not to touch, but to share. Tiny threads beneath the ground, called mycorrhizae, wove together their roots. These threads, thinner than hair, carried messages, minerals, and quiet warnings. If one part of the forest sensed dryness or disease, another part knew it. And even though they had no eyes or ears, they responded. Some scientists call this the wood wide web, but in those ancient days it was simply survival. A whisper of fungus and root, a gentle tug beneath the surface. It's strange to think of memory without a brain, but trees do remember, not in thoughts, but in rhythms. They keep time with the seasons, their growth rings becoming quiet calendars of sun and storm. Even back then in the forests of the Carboniferous period, before flowers, before fruit, before bees, the trees were learning time. When the rains came, they grew. When the skies turned dry, they hardened. And the patterns of this growth were passed on, not by teaching, but by the silent inheritance of genes shaped by survival. Each spore, each seed, carried the memory of weather, of soil, of rain. The forest thickened, ferns gave way to lycophytes, to horsetails that rose like soft columns from the swamp. The canopy grew dense, creating layers of shadow beneath which other plants could shelter. This darkness was not absence. It was a different kind of light, one that asked things to grow slowly, deliberately, with purpose. In this dimness, mosses spread like carpets and fungi bloomed like stars. The air was full of damp life, breathing gently in and out, as if the forest itself were dreaming. Now imagine you are lying on the forest floor, your back against the soft ground. You feel the slow heartbeat of the earth beneath you, and above the towering greens sway ever so slightly in windless air. You're surrounded by ancestors, not of your body but of your breath. For the oxygen you now take for granted was once a gift from these forgotten forests. They exhaled into the sky, and little by little, they made the air what it is today. They filled it with something invisible but vital. Every breath you take now carries a trace of their memory. In this way, the rain and the trees became partners. The rain shaped the forest, and the forest shaped the rain. As leaves rose to catch the sky's gifts, the sky learned to give more. Moisture lifted from every surface, feeding clouds, feeding rivers, feeding the slow return of water again and again, and so the cycle began, not a circle but a spiral, always moving forward, always shaped by what came before. These trees did not walk, not with feet, but they travelled in another way. Their spores rode the wind, settling in new soil, beginning again. Their roots pushed forward, breaking stone into soil. Their memories moved through time, carried not in brains, but in green bodies that knew how to live, how to change, how to wait. When we say the trees walked, what we mean is that life moved. It stretched and reached and remembered. It covered the earth not in conquest but in patience. And the world listened. Even now, if you sit quietly in a forest, you can feel that old memory. You can hear the echo of rain from a time when trees were young and the earth was still learning how to grow. That silence? It's not emptiness. It's history still breathing between the leaves. Let's drift deeper now, into the heart of these ancient forests, where the trees did not simply stand, they waited. Their lives were not measured in days or even years, but in centuries of stillness, of reaching slowly toward light and sinking silently into soil. Time in these forests moved differently. It thickened like the mist, settling into every fold of bark, every spiral of fern. And the memory of rain became something more. It became rhythm, a kind of music without sound, but with patterns so delicate and deep that even the rocks seemed to nod in quiet agreement. These were the days when the earth wore a green crown, high and wide, made not of flowers but of fronds and needles. The sun was softer then, filtered through the breath of sentient oceans and skies heavy with carbon. And the plants, those green architects of the land, pulled in that air and transformed it little by little, leaf by leaf. They turned it into energy, into structure, into life. Their roots, thick and tangled, pressed into the soil, not only for support but for communication. They sought out neighbours and fungi. They partnered with unseen threads to share what the forest needed: nitrogen, phosphorus, water and warnings. There were no birds to scatter seeds, no squirrels to bury the future. So the trees invented other ways, spores puffed out like quiet smoke, riding the currents of swampy breezes. Their bodies were heavy with water, with sugar, with life. When one tree grew too large, it leaned until it fell, and in that fall it made space for the next. Death was not the end, but an opening. The fallen became nurse logs, hosting ferns, mosses, and young shoots that reached upward with ancestral purpose. Even in collapse, the forest remembered how to begin again. The ground was alive. It crawled and crept and shimmered. Giant insects, armoured and glistening, scuttled through the underbrush. Millipedes the length of your arm curled between roots. Dragonflies with wingspans as wide as hawks sailed through sunbeams that touched the forest floor like secrets. These creatures were not intruders. They were part of the breath, part of the pulse. They carried spores, they opened paths, they added their own rhythm to the slow music of the trees, and the trees in turn shaped them. They offered shelter and nourishment, not out of kindness, but because the forest was whole, a single living network with countless voices. Deeper still, beneath the soil, there were other worlds. Microbes so small we still barely understand them danced in droplets of moisture. They were the chemists of the earth, breaking down the old to feed the new. Fungi, strange and ancient, wove invisible lace between stones, roots and rot. These fungal networks did more than recycle, they informed. If a tree was sick, its neighbours knew. If nutrients ran low, a call went out through the mycelial threads, and another part of the forest offered its share. It was not charity, it was continuity, an understanding older than language, that life supports life, or it does not last at all. The canopy above was not silent. Leaves trembled, even without wind, catching the tremors of insects, the changes in temperature, the breath of the sky. Each leaf was a sensor. It could detect the touch of a single drop, the warmth of a single sunbeam, the shadow of a passing cloud. Together, the canopy worked like a skin, absorbing, shielding, adjusting. Some leaves tilted to gather more light, others closed to preserve moisture. The forest responded to its world not with sudden action, but with steady change. Its wisdom was slow, but exact. These forests grew in places now buried under rock and time, in lands we call coal beds, in places we now mine for energy. But back then, they were alive in a way we've almost forgotten. They were not passive backdrops to evolution. They were active participants, shaping the atmosphere, setting the stage for what would come. Without them, the air would not have carried enough oxygen. Without them, the soil would not have formed deep enough to support animals large and soft-skinned. The forest was not just a place, it was a prelude. And then came the seeds. In some quiet corner of the ancient world, a plant did something new. Instead of releasing clouds of spores that relied on water to travel and grow, it created a container, a small protected package, a seed. Inside that seed was not just a future plant, it was a memory, a strategy, a way to wait. Seeds could pause through drought, through darkness, through cold. They could travel farther, last longer, choose when to begin. And with seeds came something else, the beginning of true forests, with trunks, with leaves, with wood. Wood, that humble material we now shape into furniture and fire, was once a marvel. It allowed plants to grow taller, to reach above their neighbours for light. It was strong but flexible, alive but enduring. The invention of wood changed everything. Suddenly plants weren't just low mats of green or soft, towering ferns. They became trees, real trees, tall, anchored, layered, and the forest changed its song. It grew in 3 dimensions, shadows deepened, winds twisted between trunks. New creatures, able to climb or burrow, found shelter. And the rain? It learned a new sound. The whisper of drops on leaves, the hush of water trickling down bark. The earth tilted in its orbit. The seasons slowly began to form more distinct rhythms. Some trees dropped leaves to survive the cold. Others thickened their bark to resist dryness. Each adaptation was a new line in the story, a verse in the long, soft poem of the forest. As the land changed, the forests followed. They marched across continents, across time, not fast but steady. One seed at a time, one ring at a time, their roots spread like thoughts. Their trunks rose like prayers, and even as new creatures appeared, amphibians, reptiles, eventually mammals, the forest remained a foundation. It was home, it was breath, it was memory made green and tall. The animals came to drink, to hide, to feed, to sleep. And the trees, without voice or will, made space for them. This was not a gift. It was a mutual becoming, life-shaping life. If you walk through a modern forest today, you can still feel it. That old intelligence, that memory. In the silence between bird calls, in the creak of a branch, in the way light sifts through green. The forest is not what it was, but it is still remembering, still learning, still waiting, because the trees, long ago, learned not just to grow, they learned to adapt, to endure, to pass on what worked, what mattered. In this way, every forest is ancient. Even the young sapling on your street corner carries echoes of the time when trees walked, not with legs, but with legacy. Now the forest quiets, as if remembering something it cannot quite say aloud. The ancient trees, once soft-bodied ferns and towering lycophytes, are long turned to stone or coal, but they left behind a silence that speaks. Their story does not end with extinction. It continues in every green thing that touches the sky today. Because the trees did not die, they changed. They learned to let go of what no longer served them, and they handed their secrets forward. One leaf to another, one season to the next. And even now, in the stillness of a grove, you can feel the echo of that great green memory unfolding around you. The earth too remembers. It holds the imprints of root systems so vast they once stitched together continents. Petrified trunks stand in deserts, like time travellers. In places where there are no longer forests, the soil still dreams of them. The air itself was once rewritten by those first trees. Before them, the atmosphere was rich in carbon and quiet in oxygen. But the trees changed that, leaf by leaf, breath by breath. With every exhale, they poured life into the sky. And that sky, once thick and alien, began to cradle new possibilities. Insects grew large. Amphibians took their first uncertain steps onto dry land. And eventually the mammals came, us too. But before all of that, the trees walked. Slowly, invisibly, patiently, they walked into the future. To see a forest is to see layers of time. In every ring of a tree trunk lies a year, a summer, a winter, a storm, a drought survived, a spring that came late, a frost that passed too quickly. The tree keeps it all, not in memory like yours or mine, but in form, in shape, in silence. A tree does not forget the seasons. It wears them, stacked one on top of the other, until its body becomes a library. When you place your hand on a tree's bark, you are touching history, not the kind written in books, but the kind that waits patiently to be felt. And though modern forests are filled with chatter, of birds, of wind, of falling leaves, they still carry the deeper quiet, the slow music, the rhythm that began when the first green things reached up from water and decided to stay. That decision changed the planet. It carved rivers, it cooled rain, it cooled the ground, it raised mountains in root-bound defiance. The earth itself bowed to the trees, not in surrender, but in partnership. And in this alliance, life became more than survival. It became complexity. It became story. There are forests today that hold fragments of that original rhythm. In the Amazon, where vines tangle like thoughts. In the redwoods, where trunks reach higher than most buildings. In the taiga, where needles catch snow like whispered promises. And in the oldest tree on earth, a quiet bristlecone pine standing alone in the high mountains, there is a memory more ancient than most civilizations. It has watched the stars shift. It has stood through empires. It has felt the ice and the fire, and still it grows. But not all memory is held in giants. Even the smallest weed growing through a crack in the sidewalk holds part of the story. The ability to seek the sun, to bend toward light, to root into the smallest dust, that too is a legacy of the trees that walked. That quiet determination, that humble endurance, is written in every blade of grass, in every green sprout pushing through soil. It is life choosing life again and again, even when the world changes around it, and the world has changed. Great forests have risen and fallen. Some were turned to coal, others to ash. We too have cut and cleared and forgotten. But the forest is not easily erased. It hides in seed banks, in rootstock, in spores waiting for the right wind. It waits in parks, in gardens, in cracks of abandoned places. The memory of green is never truly gone. It only sleeps. When we plant a tree today, we are not just adding shade or beauty. We are connecting to something old, something vast. We are giving the earth a chance to remember itself, to breathe again in rhythm, to dream again in green. Each new sapling is both beginning and continuation, a small act of restoration that echoes back through time. So imagine this. A single drop of rain falls on a young leaf. It slides gently to the ground, sinks into soil and touches a root. That root remembers, not in thought, but in design. It grows a little more, it reaches. That growth becomes wood, becomes leaf, becomes seed, and the story continues, quietly, without rush, without end. The trees may not have feet, but they walk in the most important way. They walk through time, through storms, through fire, through stillness. They walk by passing forward what they've learned, how to breathe, how to endure, how to begin again, and they invite us to walk with them, to slow down, to listen, to remember that the world once whispered in green and still can. Because when trees walked, the earth listened. And when they walk again, through us, through every seed planted, every forest protected, perhaps we will remember how to listen too. There are stories buried so deep in the earth that even the oldest trees have forgotten them. But if you could peel back the layers of soil, if you could drift downward through time and stone, you might come to a place where roots once touched the stars, not in distance, but in purpose. Long ago, when Earth was younger, and skies were thick with strange gases, something happened beneath the surface. Tiny green threads began to stretch not toward light, but toward connection. These weren't roots as we know them now, and they weren't reaching for water alone. They were seeking something deeper, a bond with the sky above, mirrored below in the quiet darkness of soil. In those early days, plants hadn't yet become what we now call trees. They were soft, sprawling things, mats of moss, feathery tendrils, small ferns that shimmered with the breath of the atmosphere. But beneath them, in the damp and dreaming earth, something new began to form, partnerships. The roots reached down, and in doing so they met fungi. These fungi were ancient beings, older than the plants themselves. They had no leaves, no stems, no colours, but they had a gift. They could gather nutrients from rock, draw life from the hardest places, and share it. The roots welcomed them, they braided together, they formed quiet alliances. And from that point on, plants would never grow alone again. This connection was the beginning of something beautiful, a hidden system where the forest learned to speak not with sound but with touch. Through this underground network, signals passed between trees, warnings, comfort, nutrients, wisdom. The roots touched the stars not by climbing upward, but by forming a mirror image of the cosmos below the ground, constellations of mycelium and root, twinkling with life and quiet intent. Above the soil, the sky was changing. The early atmosphere was thick with carbon dioxide, wrapped in haze, but the plants kept breathing, exhaling oxygen, clearing the way for light. The more they grew, the more the sky opened, and with clearer skies came new stars. The plants tilted toward them ever so slightly. Some leaves moved in rhythm with the sun, some closed at night, as if to sleep beneath the shimmer of distant galaxies. The forest began to sense the heavens, not with eyes, but with patterns. The way temperature shifted, the way moisture rose, the way shadows fell in arcs. And in time, certain plants began to grow taller, not just to rise above their neighbours, but to reach toward the sky with purpose. Their roots grew deeper, anchoring them against wind and storm, and their trunks thickened, not just for strength, but for memory. Within the rings of wood, they kept the stories of dry years and wet ones, of long summers and brief winters. They became living journals, and their pages were written by light and time. These trees, ancient and slow, began to form groves, places where roots met beneath the ground like hands holding each other in sleep. In those groves, light fell differently. It filtered through green in soft rays, and the ground felt warm with stillness. Even before flowers bloomed on earth, the forest felt complete. It was a place where air and soil met, where the earth exhaled and the stars listened. And in this space, new life began to dream. Small creatures scurried through fallen leaves. Insects hummed. The soil softened with activity. Each breath the trees released carried traces of starlight. Oxygen born from sunlight, processed in green cells, offered freely to the sky. The roots deepened their journey. In some places, they found minerals never touched before. In others, they carved paths for water, shaping the land with patient insistence. And all the while, the fungal threads continued their silent labour, passing nutrients across vast distances as if drawing invisible maps. A tree in one part of the forest could nourish another far away, simply because their roots had once met, and their memory of connection remained. This was not magic. It was science softened by time. It was biology with a beating heart. As night fell, the stars rose, and though trees have no eyes, they know the stars. Not in names or shapes, but in the rhythm of dark and light, in the cool whisper of night air, in the way moonlight brushes against bark. Some trees even track the stars through the seasons, their growth shifting subtly with the changing skies. The forest listens upward, always, not in wonder, but in belonging. The same elements that burn in stars, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, live in leaves and roots and soil. The forest knows this, not in thought, but in form. Imagine now lying on your back in such a forest. You feel the hum beneath you, not of insects or breeze, but of life older than sound. Beneath your spine, roots twist and tangle in rich earth. Above you, branches stretch in silence. Beyond them, stars blink softly in a sky that has watched every forest rise and fall. You are held between two worlds, one of soil, one of sky, and both are full of memory. Because when roots touched the stars, it wasn't a moment of triumph, it was a moment of joining. The earth and the sky stopped being separate. They began to echo each other, and life, slow, green, quiet life, became the bridge. The forest is that bridge still, a place where what's below remembers what's above, and every leaf is a page in a story that spans the universe. Let us drift deeper now into the quiet mystery beneath the forest floor, where the air is cool and heavy with the scent of damp roots and soft earth. Down here, light does not reach, yet life pulses in rich complexity. The roots move slowly through the soil, weaving and feeling, never rushing. They do not search blindly, but with a kind of knowing, a sensing. They taste the minerals in the stone, feel the pressure of moisture in the ground, detect the faint chemicals left behind by creatures above. And always, they seek the threads, the fungal threads, the mycelium. It is here in the darkness that the real forest begins, not with trunks and branches, but with touch and exchange. The mycelial network is often called the nervous system of the forest, but it is more than that. It is a language, a memory, a bridge. These threads, thinner than a strand of hair, stretch for miles. They slip into root tips and enter a partnership so perfect that it shaped the evolution of forests themselves. The fungi receive sugars made from sunlight passed down through the roots. In return, they bring back nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, and trace elements pulled from rocks too stubborn for roots to break. But more than food, they bring connection. If one part of the forest is thirsty, the others know. If a tree is attacked by disease, signals pass through the network like gentle warnings. The trees do not speak, but they respond, they listen, they remember. This network beneath our feet is old, unimaginably old. Some scientists believe it predates the roots themselves. In a time before trees, before leaves, before even insects crawled the earth, the fungi were already here, and they reached out. They found the first plants and formed bonds that would shape everything that came after. It was not competition, it was collaboration. And this quiet agreement formed in the shadowy underworld gave rise to the towering forest that would one day change the sky. Above ground, the trees responded in kind. Their roots grew deeper, more complex. They began to send out chemical signals to invite the right fungi. Some trees could form relationships with many partners. Others were choosier, bonding with only specific species. But in every case, the message was clear: we are better together. The forest was not a collection of individuals. It was one vast organism growing across continents, breathing in unison. And still, the stars watched. As the sky shifted through the ages, the forest adapted. Some trees learned to track the length of days, measuring time by the slow sweep of sunlight. Others responded to the angle of starlight, adjusting their growth with the seasons. Even now, many plants use light not just for photosynthesis, but as a clock. They know when to bloom, when to shed leaves, when to sleep. The stars, it seems, taught the forest patience, and the forest in turn reflected their rhythm back to the sky. There is a theory in science that roots can detect gravity, that they know which way is down, not because of feeling, but because of tiny grains within their cells that sink in response to the Earth's pull. These grains guide the roots, tell them how to grow, but perhaps the roots also respond to other pulls. Perhaps they sense something beyond, the tug of the moon, the breath of time itself. For the deeper they grow, the more precise they become, seeking not just depth, but balance. 'Tis as if they remember something from the stars they never saw, a pattern, a symmetry, a quiet invitation to join in the dance. And in that dance, other forms of life emerged. Small plants crept alongside the giants, forming communities within communities. Mosses softened the forest floor, vines curled upward in mimicry of branches, and fungi continued their tireless weaving, connecting every life form, no matter how small. In this living web, everything mattered. Nothing was alone. A fallen branch fed a mushroom, the mushroom fed a tree, the tree shaded a flower. The flower fed a bee, and the bee carried pollen to another tree. It was a system so complete, so perfectly interlaced, that even in silence it sang. This is how the forest touched the stars, not with leaves or light, but with design, with cooperation, with the understanding that life is not a race to the top, but a circle of giving and receiving. The tallest trees grew not just for themselves, but to shelter. The roots spread not to conquer, but to connect. Even the fungi, hidden and unseen, shaped the world not by rising above it, but by threading through it. Imagine, for a moment, a night deep in the forest. The moon is high and the wind is still. You sit among the roots of an old tree, its bark rough beneath your fingers, its trunk rising like a pillar into the sky. You feel small but not forgotten. You feel part of something vast, not because you understand it, but because you belong to it. Above you the stars shine quietly. Below you the roots pulse with memory. And in between you are held, you're connected, because the forest is not just made of wood and leaves. It is made of time, of trust, of quiet knowing passed on through generations of growth. The trees may not move, but their roots travel farther than we can see. They explore, they remember. They wait, and always they reach. Not to escape the earth, but to hold it. Not to grasp the stars, but to echo them. to remind us that even in stillness there is motion, even in darkness there is life, and even without eyes the forest can see the stars, because it has always known where it came from. Now we come to the quiet resolution of this journey, where the roots have settled and the stars still shine, distant and steady. The forest no longer needs to prove anything. It exists, and in that existence it carries all that it has learned. It doesn't rush forward or look back. It continues. That's the secret of the trees. They grow not to arrive somewhere, but to remain. Their purpose is not to conquer the sky, but to live in rhythm with it. And that rhythm, passed through soil and breath, becomes the story of Earth itself. Imagine a tree that has stood for centuries. It has seen generations of birds nest and fly. It has fed beetles and shaded ferns. It has endured storms, droughts, and quiet snowfall. Beneath it the roots have deepened and spread, touching other trees, even those of different kinds. In that network it has become a part of something larger than itself, not just a tree but a node in a web of memory. Its leaves may flutter lightly in the wind, but its roots carry a weight far older than its branches. In the cold seasons, the tree sleeps, not fully, but enough to preserve itself. And even in sleep it listens. Its roots still exchange signals. Its cells still respond to light, to temperature, to the subtle signals of time passing. It waits not in stillness, but in patience, and when warmth returns it stretches again, not just up, but down and outward. The roots continue their journey through the earth, seeking and touching and remembering. There's something deeply human about this. We too seek connection. We too look up at the stars and wonder. We plant seeds, build homes, form communities. We leave behind stories, sometimes in books, sometimes in our actions. The forest shows us that memory isn't just about recall, it's about presence, about continuing. The roots of the trees do not remember in words, they remember by living, and that's a kind of wisdom we often forget. Science tells us that some trees keep their root networks even after the trunk dies. In old forests, the stump of a long-felled tree may still be alive, kept nourished by neighbouring trees through underground connections. It no longer grows, it no longer makes leaves, but it remains, fed, remembered, held. That is what it means to be part of a forest. No life is truly isolated, no death is the end. There is always continuation, always relationship, always another breath somewhere into the system. The sky too is part of this rhythm. It is not just a distant dome, but a partner. The carbon trees take in, the oxygen they give back, the light they use to make sugar, the moisture they return to the air. It's all part of a conversation. A slow, endless exchange between Earth and cosmos. The stars don't speak, not the way we do. But they offer energy, and the trees, with their chlorophyll hearts, translate that energy into life. So when we say that roots touched the stars, we are saying that life touched possibility. That the forest didn't just grow on Earth, it grew with Earth, in tune with its orbit, its tilt, its moon, its sun. Each tree in its own way holds a piece of this cosmic choreography. The leaves move with the light, the flowers bloom with the angle of day, the roots sleep and wake with the pull of temperature and time. The forest is a clock, a calendar, a symphony. Even in the heart of a city, a single tree planted in the corner of a courtyard still carries this memory. Its roots might be cut short by concrete, but they still reach, they still listen, they still respond, and in their quiet persistence they remind us of the larger forest we came from. A forest not made just of wood and leaf, but of history, science, and time. We may not live as long as trees, we may not grow rings to mark our years, but we can plant, we can protect, we can pause and listen, and in doing so we align ourselves with something older than any map or story. The relationship between sky and soil, between stars and roots. The forest doesn't end, it changes, it migrates, it adapts, it remembers. Every fallen leaf feeds the next season. Every dead tree becomes home for moss and beetle. Every breath of oxygen we take is a gift from the trees that once walked, and the trees that still do. So next time you see a tree, whether it's towering in a forest or standing alone in a dusty street, pause for a moment. Think of the stars above it. Think of the roots below it. Think of the silence it holds, the storms it has seen, the life it supports even now. It is more than shade, more than wood. It is memory. It is motion. It is a continuation of the Earth's most patient dream. And if you listen closely, in the hush between heartbeats, you might feel it. The pull of stars in your own bones, the quiet invitation of the soil, to grow, to connect, to remember, just like the roots. Before the world had the forests we know today, before birds sang in the branches or wind curled through leaves, the air was different. It was thick and heavy, dense with gases that no lungs could breathe. Oxygen, the breath of animals and fire, was not yet abundant. The sky above was veiled in a haze, a soft golden glow created by particles that caught the light and scattered it. It was a world both alive and waiting, and in this waiting something small stirred. A green flicker, quiet and unseen, began to shape the sky itself. This was the time when trees learned to breathe, not with mouths or chests, but with leaves that drank sunlight and roots that whispered to the ground. It did not begin with trees, it began with ancestors, cyanobacteria in shallow seas, floating near the surface, using sunlight to split water and release oxygen. They were the first to change the air, the first to breathe in a way that made the future possible. Over millions of years their legacy grew, algae evolved, then mosses, then ferns, and eventually something remarkable rose from the soil. Plants that could stand tall, with stems that held them above the ground, and leaves that turned sunlight into life. These were the early trees, and with every breath they took, the world changed a little more. To understand how trees breathe is to understand a kind of magic wrapped in science. Within each leaf there are tiny mouths called stomata, invisible to our eyes, but vital to the forest's survival. These openings can open and close, sensing moisture, light, and even time. Through them, the leaf draws in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. It's not breath as we know it, no inhales, no exhale, but a gentle exchange, a balancing act that happens in silence. During the day, the leaves drink in the sun's rays. They use that energy to split water and fix carbon, building sugars to feed themselves, and in doing so, they exhale. The oxygen we breathe is a byproduct of their hunger for light. But breathing is not just about leaves, it's also about roots. The roots absorb water, drawing it up through tiny vessels pulled by the power of evaporation from the leaves above. It's a journey of thousands of feet in some trees, a quiet stream flowing upward, drop by drop. As the water rises, it carries minerals from the soil. These minerals become part of the tree's bones, part of its structure. And when the tree loses its leaves in winter or sheds a branch in storm, some of those minerals return to the earth, to feed the next generation. At night, when the sun goes to sleep, the leaves close their stomata. The forest sighs into stillness. The energy production slows, but the life does not stop. Deep inside, the cells of the tree still respire, using sugars to keep themselves alive, producing small amounts of carbon dioxide, releasing just enough to continue. This quiet cycle has persisted for hundreds of millions of years, day to night, season to season, breath to breath. The forest is always breathing, even when we can't see it. And this breath has shaped more than just the forest. It has shaped the atmosphere. Long ago, the earth was not safe for oxygen-breathing life. But the steady exhalation of plants changed that. Over countless generations, they turned a poisonous sky into a breathable one. They pulled carbon from the air and locked it in their trunks, in the soil, in the stone. Some of it became coal deep underground. Some of it became the energy we use today. But all of it began with breath. Breathing also taught the trees timing. They learned when to open and when to close. Some responded to the tilt of the earth, to solstices and equinoxes, to the longer days of summer and the shorter light of winter. Others followed the moon, their growth rising and falling with lunar rhythms. In deserts, trees learned to breathe only at night to save water. In rainforests, where moisture was plenty, the breathing was constant, fast and rich. Each forest found its rhythm, its balance, and every breath became a part of the world's great clock, and the trees did not keep this breath for themselves. As their leaves drew in sunlight and exhaled oxygen, they made it possible for others to join them. Insects first, then fish, then amphibians and reptiles and mammals. The breath of trees became the breath of animals, and this shared air created something sacred, a living loop, where plants and animals depended on each other, not just for food, but for the very act of living. When you take a breath now, slow and quiet, you're part of that loop. The oxygen in your lungs may have been part of a tree's leaf just days ago. The carbon you exhale may be drawn in tomorrow by a blade of grass. You are not outside the forest. You are within its breath. And in this way, you belong to something older, something gentler, something that remembers how the world first learned to breathe. So if you ever feel small or separate, walk among the trees. Listen not with your ears, but with your lungs. Let the air remind you that breathing is not just survival, it is participation, it is connection. It is an invisible thread between all living things, carried on the wind, shaped by the light, and gifted to us by leaves reaching toward the sky. Let's move gently now into the heart of the forest, where the breath of the trees becomes more than a process. It becomes a rhythm that touches everything. This breathing doesn't happen loudly. It isn't dramatic. It is quiet, steady, soft, like a lullaby for the earth. In every forest, whether young or ancient, the air hums with this invisible exchange. When the morning light slips through the canopy and warms the leaves, the forest begins to stir. The stomata open like tiny mouths waking from sleep, ready to drink the sunlight and draw in air. But what they draw in is not only carbon dioxide, it is history. The carbon that trees inhale may have once passed through the lungs of an animal, or drifted from a volcano, or been trapped in a bubble of ancient air beneath glacial ice. Carbon moves in circles, through oceans, through fire, through bodies, and now it enters the leaves, where it is gently taken apart and made new. The atoms do not know where they've been, but the tree does not mind. It accepts them, folds them into sugar, builds them into wood. And that wood becomes memory. A tree doesn't think like we do, but it remembers in growth. A wide ring for a rainy season, a narrow ring for drought. Each year a layer is added, wrapped around the trunk like a story. Some trees keep hundreds of these stories. Others keep thousands. And when scientists cut a cross-section and count the rings, they are not just counting years. They are reading chapters of climate, of storms, of sun and shadow. The breath of each year is locked in the layers, preserved in silence. Not every part of the tree breathes equally. The leaves are the most active, but even the bark plays a role, releasing gases, hosting tiny communities of bacteria that help in ways we don't fully understand. The roots, deep and wide, pull in water and minerals, but also communicate with fungi and microbes, trading signals, shaping the soil itself. The entire organism is involved in the act of breathing, and that breath is shared with the forest. In dense forests, the air beneath the canopy feels different, cooler, heavier, touched with the smell of leaves and earth. This is not just shade, it is the breath of thousands of trees exhaling into one another's space. And because they grow so close together, they adapt their breathing, timing their intake, and outflow in subtle coordination. Scientists have found that forests in this way act like a lung, a collective lung. They breathe as one body, taking in what the world offers and giving back what the world needs. This collective breath shapes weather too. When the forest exhales water vapor, that moisture rises into the sky and forms clouds. Those clouds may drift for hundreds of miles before they rain again, often in the very same place where the vapor began. In this way, the trees make their own rain, sustaining the system they live in. The rainforest does not just exist because of rain, it creates it. And that creation begins in a single leaf breathing beneath the sun. The rhythm of breathing also helps regulate temperature. Trees cool the air as they transpire. Their leaves, warmed by light, release water vapor, which absorbs heat and carries it away. On a hot summer day, the difference between a forest and a nearby field can be several degrees. That difference is not just felt, it is life-saving for the animals that take shelter in the shade, for the insects that nest in bark, for the moss that clings to stones. The breath of trees becomes comfort, protection, a soft hand on the world's shoulder. But perhaps most beautiful of all is how trees breathe not only for themselves. When they release oxygen, they do not hold it. They give it freely. They do not charge for it. They do not choose who receives it. Every breath you take is a gift from a plant, whether a tree or a blade of grass, or a tiny algae floating in a pond. And that gift keeps coming day after day, night after night, even when no one says thank you. This generosity echoes across time. In ancient forests, the breath of trees made it possible for giant insects to fly. In swamps that would become coal, the exhalation of leaves filled the air with the gases needed for future life. And today, as the world warms and shifts, the trees continue to breathe, absorbing carbon, cooling cities, holding the ground in place with their roots. Even when forests are cut, the remaining trees keep breathing. They try to carry the work of many until the soil grows tired and the sky no longer hears their song. Still, the forest tries. It always tries, it adapts. Trees can adjust the number and shape of their stomata depending on conditions. In dry years, they breathe less. In wet years, they open wide. Some trees pass knowledge through seeds, not in language, but in genetics shaped by survival. A sapling grown from a tree that endured fire or flood may be more ready for that challenge. This too is breathing, not just with air, but with time, with learning. And through all of this, the forest remains silent, not voiceless, but quiet. Its breath does not call attention to itself. It simply continues. You could walk among the trees every day and never notice. But once you do notice, once you truly feel the exchange happening in your own lungs, once you realize that the green around you is not just scenery, but a living, breathing presence, the world begins to feel different, softer, more connected, more alive. Because to walk in a forest is to walk through breath itself, to inhale the gift of 1,000 leaves, to exhale your own offering back. And in that gentle exchange, we become part of something older than memory. We become parts of the forest's breath. Now we come to the quiet ending of this breath-filled story, where the air is still, and the trees stand like soft towers of memory. The world around you exhales slowly, gently, as if it too is ready to rest. And in this hush, you begin to understand that breathing is not just a function of the body, it is a relationship between what is inside you and what surrounds you, between the leaves and your lungs, between sunlight and life. The forest breathes not just to survive, but to share. It has always shared. Even in places where the trees are few, where the soil is dry and cracked, something green always reaches upward. A weed pushing through concrete, a single sapling in a field of dust. These small stubborn lives are breathing too. They take in carbon, they release oxygen, and in doing so they quietly continue the work that began billions of years ago. The earth has never stopped breathing because life has never stopped growing. And neither have the trees. Even now, in the midst of change, in cities filled with smoke, in forests reshaped by fire, in landscapes altered by human hands, the trees still open their leaves. They still lift their branches to the sky. They still pull water from the ground and light from the sun. Some bend and twist to find space. Others grow in crooked spirals, following light between buildings or through crowded canopies. They do not resist change. They absorb it. And in their silence, they teach us resilience. There are forests that sleep beneath snow for half the year. Their breath slowed did but never stopped. There are jungles so thick and wet that the air itself feels green, filled with the breath of every living thing. There are mountaintop groves where the air is thin and cold, and each breath is a deliberate act of survival. And in all these places, the trees adapt their breathing to the world around them. They find the balance. They hold the rhythm. That rhythm is inside you too. Your chest rises and falls without thinking, like the sway of branches. Your breath carries oxygen that once floated through a rainforest, that once drifted across an open field. And when you exhale, you give it back, not to nothing, but to the air that feeds the leaves, that slips between grasses, that fuels the world. This is the loop we forget, but always return to. You are not separate from the forest. You are part of its breath, and even your body tells this story. The iron in your blood was made in stars. The carbon in your cells was once drawn from the sky by a leaf. The water you drink may have passed through the roots of a tree 1,000 years ago. You are not borrowing these things, you are sharing them. You are part of the great inhale and exhale that connects all living things across time and space. And in knowing this, something inside you quiets. You feel the pulse of something slower, something deeper, something true. There are places on Earth where trees have stood for thousands of years. In California, a bristlecone pine has watched the sky for nearly 5 millennia. In Chile, a single tree's root system may be older than the pyramids. These trees do not hurry. They do not speak. But their breath has been steady through ice ages and empires. They have weathered lightning and drought and silence. And still, they breathe. They have never stopped. When you walk in such a forest, even if only in imagination, you begin to feel what they hold. Not just air, but memory. not just growth, but patience. They remind you that life is not measured in speed, but in continuation, in rhythm, in breath. And the breath goes on. Each new leaf that unfurls is a promise. Each tree planted is a beginning. Even if the world grows louder, faster, more distracted, the forest remains a steady breath beneath it all. It does not demand attention. It does not ask for praise. It simply gives. It gives air. It gives shelter. It gives stillness. So pause now, wherever you are, whether near a tree or far from the forest, take a breath, a long one. Let it fill you. Let it remind you. The oxygen you hold was once part of something green, and what you give back will return to the cycle, to feed a root, to lift a leaf, to stir the sky. This is what it means to be alive on Earth, to breathe with the trees, to move in quiet partnership, to belong not only to your own life, but to the life that surrounds you. The breath of the forest is your breath too, and in every inhale you carry its story forward. Because once, long ago, the trees learned to breathe, and in doing so they taught the world how to live. If you ever run your fingers along the rough surface of a tree's trunk, you might think of bark as armour, hard, cracked, dry. But beneath that bark is something soft, something alive, something cool, listening. Trees may not have ears, yet they sense the world with their skin, and though they do not speak with voices, there are whispers beneath the bark. Whispers of water rising, of cells dividing, of wind remembered in the grain. In that quiet space between wood and air, the tree feels everything. Bark is more than protection. It is memory. It records scars, shelters insects, absorbs sunlight. It thickens with age, adapting to frost and fire. And inside, just under the outer shell, there's a layer where life moves. It's called the cambium, a thin, living sheet where new cells form. On one side it builds the inner wood, on the other it renews the bark. It is the breath between layers, the motion between stillness, and it listens not with nerves, but with reaction. Every wound a tree receives is remembered in its bark. If a deer rubs its antlers against the trunk, the tree responds, not with pain, but with healing. It grows over the wound, wraps it in new layers, and moves forward. If lightning splits a tree, the crack does not vanish, it is folded into the story. The bark becomes thicker there, more gnarled. Trees do not forget injury, they carry it, not as weakness, but as shape. Even when the bark looks smooth, beneath it are paths formed by time, where water flowed, where branches once grew, where sun touched for 100 days. This is where the whispers live, in the cambium, in the phloem, which carries sugars down from the leaves, in the xylem, which pushes water upward. These are not whispers of sound, but of flow, a constant conversation between roots and leaves, between sky and soil. The tree always knows what is happening inside it. If there is drought, it closes its pores. If there is abundance, it stretches. All of this decision-making, slow, chemical, precise, happens beneath the bark, in silence. Insects too know the bark's secret. Many live their whole lives under it. Beetles carve tunnels, laying eggs in soft wood. Ants follow the grooves like roads. Some creatures eat the bark itself, while others shelter in its folds. To them, the bark is not just the tree's skin, it is a forest of its own. And the tree, ever generous, allows it. It may defend itself with chemicals or sap, but it rarely retaliates. Instead, it adjusts. It thickens here, weakens there, it survives. In cold climates, bark becomes a coat. It insulates. It cracks to release pressure, like ice breaking across a lake. In fire-prone areas, bark becomes thicker still, like armour. The giant sequoias of California, some standing for over 3,000 years, owe their survival to bark more than any other part. Their outer layer, spongy and deep, resists flame. Even when fire climbs their trunks, the heartwood often remains safe. After the fire passes, new shoots rise from the roots, nourished by what the bark has protected. And still, the tree whispers, not in fear, not in pain, but in adaptation. When frost comes early, the tree slows its growth. When days lengthen, it wakes again. Its bark may not stretch like muscles or beat like a heart, but it flexes with time. It adjusts to gravity, to storm, to age, and as it changes, it tells the forest what it has learned. Through scent, through signal, through the quiet language of chemistry. Scientists now know that when a tree is attacked by pests, by disease, it sends out volatile compounds into the air. Other trees smell them, and they respond. They begin to produce their own defenses, sometimes hours before danger arrives. This is not chance. This is preparation, communication. A forest may be made of individuals, but it behaves like a community, and much of that behavior starts just beneath the bark. Even fungi speak here. Some live in harmony with the tree, feeding from the bark's sugars in return for protection or nutrients. Others try to take too much, and the tree pushes back. It hardens its walls, it produces resins, it seals off the invader. These responses are not fast, but they are sure. And through it all, the whispers continue. Small, silent decisions happening every moment, shaping the life of the tree, one cell at a time. If you peel bark, gently, respectfully from a fallen log, you'll find life there. Silver threads of mycelium, tiny insects, soft green lichens. It is not just the tree's outer layer. It is a habitat, a memory, a map. And every line in the bark is a sentence in a language we're only beginning to read. Not written in words, but in texture, in thickness, in direction. The way it curls, the way it cracks, the way it holds or sheds water, all of it tells a story. So the next time you see a tree, place your hand on its trunk and listen, not with ears, not with thought, but with breath, with stillness. Beneath the bark is motion, decision, awareness. Not like ours, but real. Trees whisper not because they are weak, but because they have no need to shout. They survive not by speed, but by memory. And that memory lives just below the surface, wrapped in wood, surrounded by bark shaped by time. Here, beneath the bark, the tree holds its whisper. And in that whisper is everything. The rain it has drunk, the fire it has endured, the sky it has held in its leaves. It does not speak loudly, but it never stops speaking. You only have to be quiet enough to hear. Let us slip deeper now into the soft silence wrapped in the body of a tree. Beneath the bark, beyond the whispering skin, is the place where memory becomes structure. Here, in the layered rings and slow expansion of wood, time settles in spirals. Each year, the tree adds a new story to itself, not in ink, not in sound, but in shape. The rings grow thick or thin, wide or narrow, depending on how the tree was fed by light and rain. And though no two trees are alike, they all share this ritual, to remember time by becoming it. Inside the trunk, the xylem forms the wood we see and touch. It carries water upward, cell by cell, feeding the crown from below. But only the outermost layers are alive. The heartwood in the center is dead, not useless, but strong. It holds the weight of everything above, a core of stillness that was once flow. This is the paradox of trees. They live by growing outward, leaving their oldest parts buried deep within themselves. Every inch of growth is a gesture toward light, a reaching for more sky, and every inch of wood is a trail of where they've been. They never forget. Sometimes that memory shows up in patterns, knots where branches once were, scars from broken limbs, swirls and whirls left by storms or creatures. The tree does not remove these things, it includes them, it grows around them. In this way, the trunk becomes a story not of perfection, but of resilience, and beneath the bark every scar is held with care. It is not weakness, it is testimony. Trees live slow lives, but they are not passive. Inside, the cells are busy. Cambial cells divide in two directions, one building wood, the other building bark. Sap moves with the rhythm of the sun, rising in the morning, slowing at night. Hormones travel from tip to root, telling the tree when to bud, when to shed, when to pause. And though we may not feel it, the tree is constantly responding to the angle of sunlight, to the presence of insects, to the song of water underground. Every reaction is precise, silent, and essential. There is a part of the tree known as the reaction wood. It forms when the tree leans, or when it grows on a slope, or when it must compensate for damage. This wood is denser, shaped differently, grown with purpose. It's how the tree balances itself. It doesn't straighten, it adjusts. It doesn't break, it shifts. Beneath the bark, the cells bend just enough to survive. And in this, the tree teaches a quiet lesson. To hold firm, not by staying rigid, but by being willing to change. The signals that pass within the tree are not words, but pulses, tiny shifts in chemistry, in pressure, in sugar. A broken branch sends out a wave of alarm. A sudden drought tightens the pores in the leaves. These messages begin deep inside, in the cambium, in the phloem, in the places where life still flows. It is a soft language, shaped by molecules and memory, and it governs everything the tree becomes. Outside, animals come and go, birds perch, squirrels race, fungi bloom on fallen limbs. The bark protects it all, a living boundary between the tree's quiet world and the louder one outside. But even that boundary is porous. Rain seeps in, insects burrow through, and always the bark records. Some trees even use bark to communicate with each other, releasing scents when injured or stressed, which drift through the air and are received by neighbours. In this way, even trees that stand far apart stay in touch. And if the forest is old, the bark begins to carry echoes not just of this life, but of many. Lichens colonize the surface, forming maps of colour and crust. Moss spreads in soft waves, drawing moisture from fog and rain. Spiders string webs across crevices. Each of these is a sign that the tree is still breathing, still supporting, still being a home. The whispers beneath the bark are not only inward, they are outward too. The tree speaks to the world by simply existing. In some cultures, people have believed that trees hold spirits, that the slow pulse beneath the bark is a kind of soul. And while science does not speak in such terms, it does not deny the mystery. We now know that trees react to sound, that they change when music plays nearby, that their roots follow vibrations in the soil. They do not think like us, but they feel in ways we are only starting to understand. Beneath the bark, the forest listens, and when one tree falls, the forest notices. Its roots release their hold, its canopy opens. Light touches places that have not seen it in years. Seeds waiting quietly in the shadow begin to stir. Fungi rush in to soften the fallen body, turning wood to soil, releasing the tree's breath back to the earth. But even in death, the tree continues. The nutrients in its trunk feed new growth. The bark becomes food for beetles, shelter for salamanders. Nothing is wasted. Everything is returned. So when you next walk through a forest and see a fallen log, do not look away. Look closer. That rough, peeling bark is not decay. It is transition. The tree is still whispering, still sharing, still being. It may no longer rise to the sky, but it is deep in conversation with the soil, with the rain, with the roots of others. Its voice has only changed direction. This is the gift of the bark. To hold the story, to protect it, to pass it on, even after the tree can no longer grow. Beneath the bark there is no noise, but there is always meaning. The tree remembers not with thought, but with form. And in remembering, it teaches us something essential, that quiet is not empty. It is full of everything that matters. As we move toward the close of this quiet story, we return once more to the tree, standing still, wrapped in its many coats of time. The bark, so often overlooked, becomes now the place we listen to most. It holds the last echoes of wind and weather. It carries the weight of every season that has passed. It is not decoration, it is identity, the sum of all the moments the tree has survived. And beneath it, the forest breathes. There are trees that hold lightning scars in their trunks, their bark split clean down the middle, like the spine of an open book. And yet they live. They do not erase the mark. They grow around it, folding it gently into their being. There are trees with hollow cores, where bark and cambium alone hold the shape upright, and still they leaf each spring, stretch upward and give shade. They do not cry out at what is missing. They offer what remains. Beneath the bark there is no fear of imperfection. The oldest trees on earth wear their bark like ancient skin, rough, layered, deep with cracks that have widened over centuries. They have watched glaciers melt and continents shift. They have stood through wars and silence. Their bark is not smooth because their story has not been, but each line is earned. Each ridge is a record of endurance. The tree does not ask for pity, it simply endures. That too is its whisper, not loud but lasting. In forests where no human walks, the trees speak only to each other. They rustle, they bend, they signal through the air and through their roots. The bark plays its part in this, holding the threshold between inside and out. A filter for light, a shield for water, a journal for time. It doesn't interrupt, it doesn't demand, it only continues. And perhaps that is what gives the forest its calm, the knowledge that life does not need to shout to be strong. Some trees shed their bark, peeling it off in long strips or rough chunks. To the eye, it might look like loss, like breaking down, but it is renewal. The old outer layers have done their job. They are no longer needed. So the tree lets go, and in the places where the bark has fallen, new bark grows, smoother, brighter, more ready for the seasons to come. This is how trees move forward, quietly, gradually, with no noise but the soft rustle of change. In the stillness beneath the bark, the tree prepares for everything, for frost, for fire, for drought, for bloom. The cambium reads the world in chemicals and cues. It knows when to pause, when to push, when to seal off wounds. It is instinct guided by experience, and it ensures that the tree will not just survive, but grow. It does not forget what it has been through. It builds on it, one layer at a time. And just as bark protects the tree, it also protects memory, the memory of the land, of the climate, of every passing year. Researchers now extract thin cores from tree trunks, reading them like diaries. Through these lines, they can tell when the rains were heavy, when the winters were long, when volcanoes filled the skies with ash. The bark is not just the edge of the tree, it is a border between today and everything that came before. When you sit with a tree, when you lean your back against its trunk and close your eyes, you may begin to feel something ancient move through you. Not a voice, not a thought, but a presence, a slowness that invites you to slow down too. The tree is not hurrying, it is not regretting, it is simply here. Growing when it can, resting when it must, listening to the world through the soft currents beneath its bark. And what of the trees that fall? Even then, their bark does not stop its work. It softens, crumbles, feeds the soil. It becomes home to beetles, to mosses, to fungi that turn memory into new life. The log may no longer reach toward the sun, but it still reaches into the earth, still giving, still becoming, still whispering. There is comfort in knowing that trees never waste what they have been. Every ring remains, every layer counts, and what they cannot carry they pass on, in seeds, in scent, in shadow. Beneath the bark is the wisdom to continue, to stay rooted, to grow slowly enough to feel the world as it is, and to remain open to what it might become. So the next time you see bark, cracked, curling or clean, remember what lies beneath. A whisper that has lasted longer than most lifetimes, a conversation between root and leaf, a patience that does not tire. You do not need to hear the words to feel the meaning. It is there, in the warmth of the trunk, in the stillness of the air, in the soft hush of wind passing through the branches. Beneath the bark is not emptiness, it is awareness, a memory wrapped in wood, a breath held in silence, a forest's way of remembering itself. Long before words were written, long before languages formed on human tongues, the earth spoke in green. Its voice was quiet, steady, shaped not by sound but by unfolding patterns, the slow stretch of a vine, the curl of a leaf, the lean of a stem towards sunlight. Every leaf was a phrase, every petal a pause, every branch a sentence reaching toward the sky. In those early days there was no need for noise, the earth spoke in growth, in rhythm, in breath. And the ones who listened were the ones who learned how to live. It began with sunlight, the first silent teacher. When light touched the surface of a young plant, the plant responded, not with movement at first, but with a deep internal awakening. Cells aligned, chloroplast stirred, the light became sugar, the sugar became life. The plant opened its first leaf small and soft, and in doing so it began to read the world. Not in letters or numbers, but in colour, in temperature, in the angle of the sky. It learned when the morning came, and how long the shadows stretched before evening. It learned where the warmth lived, and how to follow it. Leaves are more than decoration. They are instruments of perception. They feel the light, yes, but they also listen to air. Tiny pores, stomata, open and close across their surfaces, reading moisture, sensing heat, tasting the carbon dioxide drifting by. These pores are not random. They open only when needed, only when the air outside is safe enough and rich enough to trade breath for breath. And when the air is dry or the wind too harsh, the stomata close. The leaf curls slightly. It waits. It does not panic. It listens. It holds its breath until it can speak again. Some leaves are wide and flat, designed to catch as much light as possible. Others are narrow and thin, built to conserve water or survive cold. Some shine with wax, others grow hairs, others droop at noon and rise at night. These are all adaptations, quiet answers to environmental questions. Each shape, each pattern, each green vein is a choice, made by generations of growth, a response to what the Earth has said before. And through this silent dialogue, the planet shaped itself. In forests, the conversation becomes complex. One tree does not simply grow taller, it negotiates. It learns how much light it may take without starving the ferns below. It extends leaves where they are most useful, pulls them back where they are shaded. In tropical jungles, leaves form channels to guide water down to roots. In deserts, leaves shrink to spines, protecting water stores inside. On mountaintops, leaves grow low and leathery, hugging warmth and bracing against wind. Every climate has its own dialect, every plant its own tone, but it's not just the shape of leaves that speaks, it is their movement. Some leaves follow the sun across the sky, tracking light with gentle arcs from dawn to dusk. Others close at night, folding inward like hands at rest. Some flutter at the slightest breeze, shaking off dust, catching new scents. Still others tremble in warning, sensitive plants that curl at a touch, signaling to the world that they are aware. These gestures are not meaningless. They are messages, warnings, invitations, greetings. Plants also use colour to speak, not just to us, but to insects, to animals, to each other. Young leaves may flush red with protective pigments. Stressed plants may turn yellow, not in defeat, but in signal. Flowers bloom in vibrant codes, blue for bees, red for birds, ultraviolet for eyes we cannot see. Even the fall of leaves is a message. To the tree a letting go, to the soil a gift of nutrients, to the surrounding life a signal that winter is near. The ground itself listens, the forest changes tone, the world leans inward for sleep. Some plants go further. They release scents, not just perfumes to attract, but chemicals to inform. When a leaf is bitten by an insect, it may send out a volatile compound. Neighbouring plants smell it and begin preparing defences. This is not instinct alone. It is communication. Leaves sending warnings across a landscape. Telling others, danger is near, be ready. These signals drift on wind, ride on water, are absorbed through roots and pores. They are words without letters, sentences written in molecules. And still, the earth listens. The soil shifts to support what the leaves are doing. Microbes gather around roots of stressed plants. Fungi stretch toward those in need. The light changes, and the leaves respond, and in turn the world responds again. It is not a conversation of speakers and listeners. It is one continuous thread. Light into leaf, leaf into sugar, sugar into root, root into soil, soil into breath. The planet speaks not in commands, but in cooperation. Humans once listened more closely. We watched how leaves moved before rain, how they turned their faces before wind. We saw how crops curled when the soil grew tired. We planted by the moonlight, by shade, by instinct learned from watching leaves. Some still do. In the presence of plants, we slow down. We breathe more deeply. We remember something, not in words, but in feeling. That we are not outside this language. We are written into it. Because we too are shaped by light. We rise in its warmth. We reach toward it. We sleep when it goes. And we breathe what the leaves offer, and return to them what they need. Our lungs and their stomata are twin instruments in a shared song. We do not hear it, but we are part of it. So if the earth once spoke in leaves, it still does. The language has not vanished. It is in every sprout that pushes through stone, every vine that climbs a wall, every tree that bursts into bloom after months of stillness. We only need to watch, to be quiet, to understand that sometimes the most important things ever said have no sound at all. Let's follow the whisper of green deeper now, into the places where leaves have shaped not only the earth, but life itself. From the moment plants took root and spread their leaves to the sky, the world began to change. The atmosphere grew clearer. The oceans shifted in colour. The winds began to carry not just dust, but breath. And the creatures that crept, flew and swam through this altered world were shaped by what the leaves gave. They offered food, yes, but also shelter, moisture, scent and shade. In every way, life followed the language of the leaves. Leaves became the first roof over the world, a canopy of light catchers stretching from jungle to tundra, filtering sun and softening storm. Underneath, the temperature steadied. The air slowed. Evaporation was reduced and new layers of life formed. Insects, mosses, amphibians. The shadow of a leaf was not an absence of light, but a new invitation, a different kind of world, one made gentle by green, and the forest through its leaves wrote the terms of this invitation. But leaves do more than regulate, they transform. When sunlight hits a leaf, something miraculous happens, light becomes sugar. This process, photosynthesis, is the quiet miracle that sustains nearly all life on Earth. Plants take in carbon dioxide and water, they capture energy from the sun, and with no fanfare, no sound, they create glucose. They keep some for themselves, of course, to grow, to divide, to live. But the rest, it moves through the world, into the stems, into the roots, into the air, into the mouths of herbivores and beyond. The sugar born in a single leaf may become the flight of a bird, the leap of a deer, the breath of a child. And this gift is constant. It does not rest. Even as a leaf weathers and fades, even as its edges crisp and curl, it is still part of the cycle. When it falls, it carries nutrients to the soil. Worms and fungi break it down. Its final whispers become the foundation of new roots. In time, the tree will grow again. Another leaf will rise in its place. Another sentence written into the green language of the earth. And still, the leaves speak. Some change colour in the autumn, not just as a sign of death, but as a display of change. Pigments that were always there, hidden behind chlorophyll, now revealed like a secret kept all summer. Yellows and reds, purples and browns, all announcing a shift in the forest's breath. Animals take note. Insects burrow deeper. Birds begin their flights. The colour is a signal, not a farewell. It is the soft punctuation at the end of one season's sentence before the next begins. Some trees drop their leaves all at once, as if sighing. Others shed slowly, thoughtfully. And in tropical places, where seasons are marked more by rain than by cold, leaves come and go in a rhythm shaped by water. There is no single way to speak leaf. Each plant has its own dialect, shaped by place and purpose. A cactus whispers differently than a maple. A fern speaks in curls and spores. A vine speaks in climbs and spirals. But all of them speak, all of them respond, and all of them together form the voice of the land. Even the arrangement of leaves on a stem is a kind of syntax. Some grow opposite in pairs, others spiral, some form rosettes hugging the ground in quiet circles. These patterns are not accidental, they are strategies. To catch more light, to shed more rain, to avoid shading neighbours. It is geometry born from survival, shaped by time, and inside each leaf, cells are arranged in structures of elegant design, palisade cells for capturing light, spongy layers for air, veins for pinner and sugar. Every leaf is a masterpiece, both beautiful and necessary. When a tree loses its leaves for the season, it is not a loss but a rest. The tree withdraws into itself. It listens instead through its roots, through its bark. It watches the sky with bare limbs. It does not forget how to grow, it only pauses. And when the time is right, it begins again, with a bud, a small green tongue unfolding toward warmth. That first leaf is both memory and hope. It remembers what worked before. It carries within it the instructions for speaking again. Humans have long looked to leaves for guidance. We brewed them for medicine. We studied their shapes to predict weather. We pressed them into books, drew their patterns on stone, carved them into wood. A single leaf in the hand can remind us of where we've come from. A forest, a garden, a place where we once stood still and looked upward. Even now, in cities of concrete and glass, we plant trees along sidewalks, tend pots on balconies, cradle herbs on windowsills. We do this not only for beauty, we do it to stay in the conversation. Because when you touch a leaf, when you hold it gently between your fingers, you are touching more than a plant. You are touching a sentence written in light, a structure built by patience, a living document that responds to the world and records it in green. The leaf doesn't need to speak loudly. Its softness is enough. And perhaps the earth still speaks in this way because it is the only language that truly lasts. Buildings fall, roads crack, voices fade, but leaves return, season after season, quietly, generously, without pride. They do not demand attention, they do not need applause. They simply unfurl, do their work, and then let go. In this there is deep wisdom, in this there is peace. So the next time a leaf lands on your shoulder or flutters past your path, pause. Don't brush it away too quickly. Let it rest. Let it say what it came to say. It may be repeating something the earth has been trying to tell you for a long, long time. Now let us return gently to the place where this quiet language began, the still green heart of the world, where leaves move slowly through light and time. The conversation never stopped. It only grew wider. What started as the simple unfolding of a leaf became a vocabulary spoken by forests, echoed by meadows, whispered by moss and reed. And though we may no longer bend close to listen the way we once did, the earth has not forgotten how to speak in leaves. In many places, leaves mark the rhythm of the year more clearly than any clock. They arrive in spring, tentative and pale. They deepen in summer, wide and strong. They shift and fall in autumn, soft and dry. And in winter, their absence speaks just as clearly in a hush, a pause, a breath drawn in and held. The tree does not resist this cycle. It trusts it. It steps back so it may step forward again. The forest breathes in seasons, and the leaves are the lungs. Even in decay, leaves continue to speak. As they fall, they begin to break apart. Their edges curl and darken. Rain soaks them. Fungi touch them. Worms pull them into the soil. And there, beneath our feet, they become something else. Not waste, but renewal. Nutrients once held in sunlight are returned to the roots. The tree grows from its own memory. The next generation rises from the words of the last. Nothing is lost. The story continues. And we are not separate from this story. The oxygen we breathe, the food we eat, the shade we cherish, all come from the work of leaves. Their language shapes our lives in ways we barely notice, yet it is constant. It's in the gentle sway of trees outside our window, in the scent of cut grass, in the rustle of branches during an evening walk. The world speaks to us every day, not in sentences, but in presence. Somewhere right now, a child is holding a leaf to the sun, watching the light pour through its veins like stained glass. Somewhere, an elder is resting under a tree, letting shadows ripple across folded hands. Somewhere, a wind is moving across a field, carrying with it 1,000 messages written in green. The earth is still speaking, the leaves are still listening, and we are still part of the reply. There are places in the world where people plant trees for each birth. The tree grows as the child grows. It changes shape with them, offers them shade, holds their laughter. In other places, trees are planted in memory, to honour a life, to continue a name. In both moments, the leaf becomes a symbol not only of nature, but of meaning. It says what we cannot. It stands where we cannot. It speaks when we are silent. Modern science, too, has begun listening more carefully. We study how leaves open and close, how they signal stress, how they adapt to pollution, how they recover from trauma. We measure their gas exchange, their colour, their shape. But for all we learn, we are only beginning to understand the language of leaves. It is older than our tools, wiser than our questions. It has no beginning and no end. It simply continues. In art, leaves are painted and carved, woven and drawn. They appear in poetry, in prayer, in lullabies. They are used to symbolize life, rebirth, fragility, strength. And perhaps that is why we keep returning to them, because they hold opposites gently. They are delicate and resilient, temporary and eternal, silent and expressive, just like us. And so, as you walk beneath a canopy or across a garden or along a path, look again at the leaves around you. Each one is writing something. Each one is catching light, holding water, feeding the world. Each one is a message from the earth saying, I am still here. I am still listening. I am still alive. You may not hear the words, but you feel them. In your breath, in your bones, in the way you pause without knowing why, when the wind moves through the trees. That pause is understanding, that stillness is reply. Because the earth once spoke in leaves, and it still does. Softly, surely, slowly, it speaks through every green thing that grows, through every shadow cast by a branch, through every breeze that lifts a stem. And when we remember how to listen, truly listen, we remember something in ourselves, something rooted, something reaching, something quietly, endlessly becoming. There was a time before shadows, a time before trees reached for light or stood still in the wind. Before anything rose tall enough to block the sun, the earth knew only brightness and open sky. The earliest forms of life lived flat, spread across shallow waters or clinging low to stone and soil. They did not cast shadows. There was no need. But then something happened. Something small reached upward, a stem, a stalk, a slender thread of green that dared to grow taller than the rest. And for the first time, sunlight was broken. A soft edge of darkness appeared on the ground. The first shadow had been cast. That shadow was not just absence, it was evidence. It proved that something had changed, that life had begun to rise. The world would never be the same. From that moment forward, light had a companion. And every plant that stretched upward would leave a trail of itself behind, a shadow shaped by angle and hour moving as the earth turned. The forest, when it came, would become a place of light and dark, of dappled patterns and shifting shade. But it began with just one. The first shadows were gentle. Cast by ferns and mosses, they moved with the sun, stretching long in morning and evening, shrinking at midday. These shadows cooled the ground, slowed evaporation, protected roots. Animals began to notice. Some crept into the shade to rest. Others used it to hide. The shadow was not a threat. It was a gift, a pause in the brightness, a place where heat eased, where the air held still. As trees evolved, the shadows deepened. Their trunks blocked light more completely. Their branches wove together to form canopies, and under these, a new world emerged. A forest floor that was dim, cool and moist. Plants adapted to grow in this filtered light, broad-leaved ground covers, fungi glowing faintly in the dark, seedlings learning patience as they waited for a gap in the green ceiling above. The shadow became more than a shape. It became habitat. It became home. And with it came rhythm. Shadows moved in long arcs each day. They returned in cycles each year. Plants noticed. Some opened their leaves only in the morning. Some bloomed when their patch of light was longest. Others knew when to sleep, to shed, to wait. The shadow became a clock, its movement across the ground as reliable as the sun's rise. Life began to follow it, respond to it, depend on it. Even the shapes of trees changed. Some grew tall and narrow to cast less shadow on neighbours. Others spread wide, claiming space for their light-hungry leaves. In crowded forests, a quiet competition began, not through violence but through shade. To cast a shadow was to hold power. To live in one was to adapt. And so, beneath the tallest trees, a layered world formed. The overstory reached the sky. The understory stretched between. The ground stayed soft and dim, each layer shaped by shadow, each life tuned to its place in the light. But the shadow was never just stillness. It moved. As clouds passed, as branches swayed, as leaves fluttered, the light flickered and danced. Shadows became patterns, a language of contrast. Animals evolved to blend with it, spotted deer, striped cats, insects with broken outlines that vanished in leaf light. The forest became a painting, constantly changing, and the shadow was its brush. In dry places, shadows offered survival. Trees with long limbs shaded the soil beneath, preserving water. Their own seeds sprouted in that coolness. In mountain forests, shadows marked the slope of the land, falling long on north-facing cliffs, vanishing quickly on southern faces. In tropical jungles, shadows were thick and deep, and yet somehow always moving. In all of these places, light and shadow told the story of place, of direction, of time. Humans too came to watch shadows. Before clocks, we used sundials. Before compasses, we read the tilt of light. Builders designed homes with shadows in mind, to cool in summer, to warm in winter. Farmers watched shadow lines to know when to plant. Artists chased shadows across paper and canvas. Poets wrote of long shadows at dusk, of morning light through trees. The shadow became metaphor, for memory, for mystery, for all the things we see but cannot hold. But in the forest, the shadow never meant fear. It meant balance. Too much light and the ground burned dry. Too much darkness and nothing grew. The shadow, like breath, came and went. It reminded everything beneath the canopy that stillness was not silence. It was softness. It was shelter. It was the invitation to slow down. Imagine lying on your back beneath a tree. The sun moves slowly above, the leaves above you shift, and the shadows on your skin dance. You feel the cool patches and the warm ones. You're not watching the tree, you're watching its shadow. You're seeing how it holds the light, not tightly, but with grace. And in that moment, you remember that even what seems like absence is filled with meaning. The first shadow ever cast was not loud. It didn't announce itself, it simply arrived. And in doing so, it gave depth to the world. Light alone is beautiful, but flat. It is the shadow that creates form. That tells you where one thing ends and another begins. That gives the forest its mystery, its layers, its hush. And the forest has kept that gift close. Every branch, every leaf, every blade of grass has its shadow. They follow, stretch, shrink and vanish, but always return. Like a quiet twin, reminding each life that growth is not only upward, it is also inward. The shadow is not what you are missing, it is what you are becoming. Let's drift further into the forest now, where the shadows are not only shapes on the ground, but soft hands holding every living thing in a quiet embrace. As the trees grew taller and the world cooled beneath their canopies, the shadow became more than a silent follower of light. It became a sculptor, carving space into time, turning brightness into mystery, giving the world depth, texture, and rhythm. The forest didn't just grow in the light, it grew in the in-between. In the spaces where light met shadow, life found its own way of listening. Underneath every great tree there is a place where shadow lives longest. It is cool there, soft underfoot, damp even in dry seasons. The ground does not crack and small things thrive. Worms, beetles, seeds that wait for the next storm. These places are often overlooked, but they are the lungs of the forest floor. They are where moisture gathers and where decay becomes renewal. The shadows protect what is becoming. They slow things down so that life can unfold gently. Not every seed wants the full sun. Some need time, some need cover, some need the hush of shadow to grow at all. Leaves, too, shape shadows. A single tree does not simply block the sun, it scatters it. Its leaves shift and spin, letting narrow rays through. These sunflecks, brief, warm, golden, touch the forest floor like passing thoughts. A patch of moss lights up for a few seconds and then fades. A lizard catches a moment of heat and then slips away. A flower bud, dormant for days, opens when touched by that narrow beam. The shadow is not only a place of stillness, it is a place of timing, a place where life waits for its perfect moment. And not all shadows are cast by trees. Tall grasses, rocks, even the fold of a hill can throw long lines across the land. In deserts, a single shadow may be the only place cool enough for a seedling to survive. In mountains, shadows stretch across valleys, marking the hours before the sun climbs high enough to warm the soil. In Arctic lands, the sun skims low, and shadows grow long and wide, covering the world in slow-moving shade. Everywhere on Earth, life pays attention to where the shadows fall. In the forest, even sound changes in the shadow. The heat of the sun stirs the air, carries the buzzing of insects, the crack of twigs, the rustle of feathers. But in the shadow, these sounds are gentler. The air is denser, cooler, slower. Footsteps soften, breaths seem deeper. The hush under the trees invites stillness. Not silence, but presence. Many animals seek it not just for safety, but for quiet. In the cool pools of shadow, deer rest, owls doze, frogs sit motionless in moss. To them, shadow is not the absence of something. It is the fullness of everything that doesn't need to be loud. And the trees themselves listen to their shadows. They measure light carefully, how much reaches their lowest branches, how long each leaf stays illuminated. They stretch or shrink in response. Some leaves grow larger in deep shade to catch more light. Others stay small and tight at the top to endure wind and glare. The tree is always balancing its energy, its water, its reach, and the shadow cast and received is part of that conversation. It is not a mistake, it is a message. In some forests, the patterns of light and shadow are so regular that entire plant communities grow in layers. The upper canopy takes the brightest light. The understory claims what passes through. The shrubs and herbs below wait for gaps caused by a fallen limb or a shifting branch to bring new light and life. These gaps, brief moments where shadow lifts, are called light windows. In them, entire dramas unfold. A seedling grows 10 times faster. A vine climbs towards the sun. A bird finds food where before there was none. The forest moves forward in these small openings. The shadow steps aside and the story shifts. The roots, hidden below, live entirely in shadow, yet they are nourished by what happens above. The cooling effect of the leaves means the soil holds more water, the shade means slower evaporation, and the steady temperatures in these dim places allow roots to extend deeper, to build broader networks, to speak more clearly to the fungi and microbes that make up the forest's foundation. The shadow is not a barrier here. It is protection. It is the condition that makes complexity possible. Even fire respects shadow. In dense forests where light barely touches the floor, fires often burn slower. Moisture clings to shaded logs. The ground stays damp. The flames pause, shift, climb upward instead. And in these burns, new life is born. Fire creates light, but it also relies on shadow to shape its path. In this way, even destruction is part of the forest's rhythm. Light, shadow, ash, growth, each one follows the other. The human body knows shadow too. We seek it in heat. We draw close to it in rest. Our eyes relax in dimness. Our breath slows. In the deepest part of the woods, where the light is dappled and low, we often feel something ancient stir in us, a quiet recognition. We may not have words for it, but we feel it. That shadow is not just a place, it is a memory, a soft echo of where we came from, of what protected us before walls and roofs and fire. And so the shadow endures, not as darkness to be feared, but as depth to be honoured. It is the place where roots find water, where seeds wait, where rest begins. The forest would be flat without it. The world would be blinding. Life would grow too fast, burn too quickly, fall apart too soon. The shadow slows it all down. It gives each thing a chance to arrive in its own time. When we think of growth, we often imagine upward movement, toward light, toward sun's sky. But all growth begins in shadow, in soil, in stillness. The first stirrings are hidden. The first stretches are cautious. And even as we grow toward the sun, we carry our shadows with us. They are not behind us. They are part of us. They teach us to bend, to rest, to wait. The forest knows this. The trees know this. And so they cast their shadows not to hold the light away, but to hold the world together. Now we arrive in the softest part of the forest, where shadow and silence blend into one another like dusk into night. This is where the journey of light ends each day, not in absence, but in rest, and where the shadow begins not as a retreat, but as a gentle hand guiding life to pause. The trees, tall and still, wear their shadows like robes. They do not shed them. They carry them gracefully, letting each one fall across the land in patterns too intricate for us to measure. But the forest remembers. The shadow has shaped every root, every leaf, every breath. As the sun dips low, shadows grow long again. What was once small and sharp now stretches, curves become soft and slow. The world prepares to sleep. Birds quiet their songs, flowers fold inward, the breeze slows to a hush. Even insects pause, waiting for the cooler hours or the rising moon. In this dimming light, everything feels a little more sacred, a little more connected. The shadows have returned to wrap the forest in stillness. In these moments, the forest feels older, not just in age, but in wisdom, as if it remembers the first shadow, the first tree that rose tall enough to catch the sun and send part of it downward, as if it remembers when shadows were new, when every leaf was learning where to place itself in the dance between light and dark. There is reverence in this quiet balance. The forest does not chase the light. It does not fear the dark. It simply accepts both and grows with them. The creatures of the night begin to stir. Insects with wings like lace rise into the cooling air. Owls blink open their wide eyes. Small mammals skitter among the leaves. These lives are shaped not by the brightness of day, but by the gentleness of shadow. Their fur and feathers, their sounds and scents, are all tuned to the world that exists once the sun lowers its voice. And the trees welcome them. Their branches cradle nests, their trunks offer cover. Their roots make pathways. The shadow is not empty for them. It is full of meaning. Even in places where the moon shines bright, the shadows persist. They become silver instead of black, softer but still present. The forest glows with a different kind of light, one made not for seeing but for feeling. You sense the nearness of trees more than you see them. You feel the coolness of bark, the presence of ferns brushing your legs. You walk slower, breathe deeper, listen more closely. The shadow teaches attentiveness, not in fear but in curiosity. And beneath the ground, in complete darkness, the roots move. Slowly, surely, they stretch and divide. They follow the moisture, the minerals, the voices of other roots. They do not need light. They are guided by the history of the forest, by signals passed through fungi, by the memory of water. Their shadow is not cast, but lived. A darkness filled with communication, with growth, with care. The forest is just as alive below as above, and its rhythm is held equally in root and branch. Over time, the shadow leaves its mark, not just on the land, but on the soul. Artists have painted it. Writers have shaped it into symbol. Spiritual traditions have honoured it as the place of inward journey. For shadow is not just what is hidden, it is what is held, what is protected until ready, what is softened so that it may unfold gently without pressure, like a bud waiting for spring, like a thought before it is spoken. When you walk in a forest and see your own shadow stretch beside you, know that it too belongs here. You are not separate from this rhythm. You cast shadow because you stand in light. You cast shadow because you are part of this world that balances both. And just like the trees, you grow with both. You learn with both. You carry your own quiet dark, not as a flaw, but as a place of potential. The shadow reminds us that there is no true edge between presence and absence, between seen and unseen. Everything blends. Everything cycles. Day into night, light into dark, sun into root. And in the middle of all this is the forest. Breathing, bending, remembering. Some shadows will never be measured. They flicker and vanish too quickly. Others are permanent, carved into canyons and cliffs. Some are cast only once, at sunset, at solstice, at the exact moment when the sun touches the horizon in a line with the earth. These are not just shadows. They are ceremonies. They are the earth showing us, in silence, how to mark time. So next time you see a shadow, whether from a tree, a bird, or your own outstretched hand, pause. Don't look away. Let it teach you. Let it show you that shape does not exist without contrast, that life does not deepen without quiet, that growth does not occur without rest. Because the first shadow ever cast was not an accident. It was the beginning of perspective. And every shadow since has been a reminder that the world is not flat, not simple, not always bright, but it is full, it is layered, it is alive. And in the forest where light and darkness meet in 1,000 soft exchanges, the shadow is not something to fear. It is something to follow. It is the echo of the tree, the footprint of light. The forest's way of showing us that even what seems hidden can be beautiful. Even what seems quiet can speak. There are trees that never moved, and yet they travelled farther than we ever could. They remained rooted to the same patch of soil, the same slope of hill or bend of river, and still they reached across centuries, across continents, across memory. They did not walk, yet they spread. They did not speak, yet they were heard. Their branches never left the sky, and still they carried their kind into new lands, new weathers, new stories. This is how trees travel, not with footsteps, but with time, not with speed, but with stillness. And their journey is written not in maps, but in seeds. A seed is a story folded small. It contains the shape of the tree that will be, its roots, its crown, its colours and cycles. But it also contains memory of a wind and rain, of drought and flood, of fire and snow. The seed is not a replica. It is a response. It does not simply recreate the parent tree. It begins again, in a new moment, with new possibilities, and when it falls, when it's carried by wind or water or animal, it begins to travel. Some seeds are small and light, spun with fine wings that ride on breezes. Others are sticky or barbed, clinging to fur or feathers. Some drift on water, finding distant shores. Others are buried by squirrels, forgotten, and left to rise. And some explode, launching themselves with sudden bursts, scattering in all directions. These quiet travellers carry the forest forward, step by invisible step. Each one is a decision, not made by thought but by design. The tree does not move, but its story does. And when the seed finds soil, it waits. Not every journey ends in growth. Some seeds sleep for months, even years. They test the air, the light, the moisture. Only when the world feels right do they open. And then, slowly, silently, the journey continues. A root pushes down, a shoot stretches up. The tree has begun again, not where it started, but where it has landed. It has not moved, yet it is now somewhere else. And so the forest walks, not with legs, but with lineage. This movement is not always outward. Sometimes the forest pulls inward, returning to places it once left. In the cycles of ice ages and warming periods, forests have crept and receded, advancing up hills, retreating into valleys, reshaping the land like slow rivers. Fossils show us where forests once stood, in deserts now dry, on islands now drowned, beneath cities paved in stone. The trees remember, not in thought, but in root. Where they once were, they often return. Their seeds lie waiting in the soil, dormant for decades, until rain or fire or wind makes space again. Then they rise. Some trees travel in other ways. Their pollen, light as dust, moves with the wind, crossing miles to meet a flower, to make a seed. Others send runners, long, snaking stems that take root nearby, forming clones. A single tree can become a grove this way, an entire forest made of one life repeating itself. These are not many trees. They are one traveller, spreading its shadow wider, speaking its name in the shape of leaves. And still, the tree does not move. It stays anchored, wrapped in bark and time, but its presence expands. Its roots meet those of others. Its leaves join the chorus above. Its breath enters the sky, feeding the air. And its fallen leaves return to the soil, feeding the ground. In this way, the tree grows outward in every direction, in matter, in memory, in motion. It may never leave its spot, but its influence travels farther than we can see. Even in death, the tree continues. Its trunk becomes home to birds and beetles. Its branches fall and rot, feeding fungi and seedlings. Its seeds live on, carrying pieces of it forward. And some trees, even after they fall, continue to sprout, new shoots rising from the old stump, reminders that the journey is not over. A tree may fall, but the forest moves forward. In this, there is a lesson. That movement is not always what it seems, that to go far one does not always have to leave. That presence, when deep and true, ripples outward through generations. The trees teach us this. They do not chase the horizon. They make the horizon come to them. Imagine standing in an ancient forest, your feet on roots that stretch for meters in every direction. Above you, branches rise high, touching light. Around you, leaves whisper in wind. Beneath you, seeds sleep. You're surrounded by motion that does not stir, by travellers who have never taken a step. And yet they are everywhere. The trees have crossed time to reach you. They have sent their voices in sap, in scent, in seed. They have crossed fire and storm, survived cold and flood, and now they stand still but not silent, moved but never moving. And the forest continues, walking without feet, carried by what it lets go and what it quietly receives. Let us travel now alongside the trees, not by road or rail, but by rhythm, the slow, steady pulse of growth and passing seasons. Their movement is measured not in miles, but in generations. What they pass forward is not luggage, but knowledge. What they carry is not weight, but wisdom, soft and green, folded in leaves, hidden in bark, whispered in the space between roots. When trees travel without moving, they carry entire ecosystems with them, shifting the very language of life across time and place. Some trees carry this wisdom in scent. When the first rains fall after a long drought, acacia trees release compounds into the air. These signals warn others. Water has returned, but so have grazers. The neighbouring trees begin to defend themselves, adjusting the chemistry in their leaves to be less appealing, more bitter. These signals drift in breezes, touching trees many meters away. The trees do not move, but their reach extends. They speak in invisible waves, shifting the behaviour of creatures nearby. In this way they shape the land. Others send their legacy underground. Through mycorrhizal networks, threads of fungi thinner than a hair, trees share nutrients, pass messages, offer support to those in need. A dying tree, sensing its end, may send remaining sugars to younger trees nearby. In this act of quiet giving, it travels one final time not toward new soil, but into the future, woven into the growth of others. It becomes part of something wider. This is how forests move, not as individuals, but as a collective breath. Over centuries, entire landscapes shift because of trees that never left. A single pine species introduced on a windy cliff may catch gusts strong enough to bend it inland. Year after year, its seeds ride those same winds, forming a line of green into the valley. Within decades, the slope changes. Shade settles, soil thickens. New species arrive, lichen, birds, mosses that would not have come otherwise. And none of this required movement from the tree itself, only presence, only persistence. Even in fire, trees travel. In fire-prone forests, many trees produce cones that stay sealed for years. Only intense heat will open them, releasing seeds into a landscape cleared of competitors. These seeds fall not in despair, but in opportunity. Fire is not the end for these trees, it is part of their journey. What burns also begins, and through ash, the next forest grows. Trees born of flame carry with them not scars, but strategy. They do not flee fire, they use it. They have learned how to stay in place and still begin again. Some species are older than mountains. Clonal trees, like quaking aspens, reproduce underground, sending up new trunks from the same root system. What seems like a forest of many is in fact one organism spread over acres, enduring through centuries. These trees do not travel in form, but in feeling. Their heartbeat pulses through shared roots. Their experiences, encoded in chemical shifts and genetic subtlety, move sideways instead of forward. This horizontal movement, quiet and slow, can last for thousands of years. And what of the seeds that fail? The ones that fall on stone or dry soil or places where no growth can happen? Even these are part of the journey. They test the limits of where trees can go. They mark the edge. They leave behind stories of where life tried. And in time, those places may become fertile. What was once impossible becomes possible, because a seed fell there first and dreamed. In some human lifetimes, the movement of a forest might seem invisible. Trees grow so slowly. They shift only slightly. But over the arc of centuries, they transform entire continents. In Europe, forests once covered vast plains, spreading and withdrawing with ice and thaw. In North America, tree lines have crept north as climates warmed. In deserts, where forests once stood, solitary trees now remain, old survivors holding their place, still rooted in memory. They haven't left, but the world moved around them, and they remained. Sometimes the movement of trees is not in their physical spread, but in the lives they touch. A child climbs a branch and decades later returns with their own children. A poet writes beneath its shade. A carpenter shapes its fallen limb into a cradle. A stranger leans against its trunk, finds comfort, moves on. The tree stays. But its shadow has touched hundreds of stories. It has moved without stepping once. And then there are trees we carry with us, in seeds saved in our pockets, in saplings planted in new countries, in orchards built from memory. We bring them because we miss them, because they remind us of home, because they taste like something we want to remember. These trees, grown in unfamiliar soil, stretch towards skies that do not know their name. And still they grow, still they root, still they begin again. We are their travellers, we move so they may stay. And in that partnership, both tree and person become part of a shared journey. Even in cities, trees move the world. A lone tree growing between sidewalks, its roots lifting the concrete, its leaves cooling a street corner, its scent changing how someone feels as they pass by. It may never grow wide, it may never drop a single seed, but in presence alone it moves hearts, it shifts the rhythm of the day, it makes a place more bearable, more human, and in that it has travelled further than we can know. So no, trees do not walk, but they travel. They travel through time, through influence, through the invisible trails of breath and soil and touch. They carry the past forward, and they anchor the future in stillness. Their journey is not marked by motion, but by meaning. They go nowhere, and yet they reach everywhere, because the world moves through them, and they, in return, shape the world as it moves. Now we come to the quiet end of the forest journey, not a destination, but a resting point. The trees have not moved, yet everything around them has. Winds have changed, seasons have turned, generations of birds have come and gone. The soil beneath them is richer than when they first began, and the sky above has known their breath. In their stillness, they have travelled through time, and now, beneath their wide branches, we begin to understand stillness is not the opposite of motion. It is its own kind of movement, deeper, slower, more lasting. A tree that stands for centuries has seen more than we ever could. It has listened to the slow roll of thunder over mountains, the hush of snowfall settling on limbs, the quiet crack of bark in deep winter. It has tasted the wind of 1,000 storms. It has held its ground through drought and flood. And still it grows, still it stretches, still it sends its story outward, through seeds, through shade, through silence. That is the journey. That is the path taken not with feet, but with faith. Even now, as the world changes quickly, as roads replace meadows and towers rise beside roots, the trees hold their course. They do not run, they do not rush, they simply remain. And in their remaining, they teach us how to stay, how to grow where we are, how to listen to what is beneath us, how to offer what we have without needing to go anywhere at all. Their stillness is a gift, not an absence. Their place is a choice. This is not a stillness without action. A tree is always busy. Its roots explore, its leaves turn, its cells divide and heal and transform. It is not asleep. It is simply aligned with the soil, with the air, with the arc of the sun. Each ring it adds is a note in a long song. Each season it weathers is a stanza in a poem that stretches back to the first forests and forward to the ones we have not yet imagined. The tree is a traveller through time, and we are merely walking alongside it for a short while. And as we do, we begin to carry its story. In the wood of our homes, in the breath in our lungs, in the peace we feel when we lean against its trunk. Trees do not move, but they move us. They change how we feel, how we remember, how we dream. A forest has never left its place, but it has shaped every culture, every landscape, every moment of stillness we've ever known. To walk through a grove is to pass through generations of unseen steps, not our own, but the ones the trees have offered us in shadow and root. Even when a tree dies, its journey does not end. Its wood becomes shelter, its bark becomes soil, its seeds, scattered nearby, begin again. And even if none of that survives, its shape is remembered, in drawings, in songs, in names carved into benches and tree rings counted in schoolrooms. A tree may fall, but its presence echoes. That is movement too, that is legacy. And sometimes the most extraordinary journeys are those that carry others. A single tree may host thousands of lives, insects, birds, mammals, mosses, fungi. Its branches are bridges, its hollows are homes, it feeds what it will never see, and when a new tree grows in its shade, it bends slightly to make room. It shares the sun, it shares the soil. In this, it moves the forest forward, not by going anywhere, but by making it possible for others to do so. We are not so different. Our lives are full of movement. But the movement that matters most is not always visible. It's in what we grow, in what we shelter, in what we pass forward. When we hold a child, when we plant a seed, when we build something meant to last, we are moving through time, like the trees. We are casting roots and offering branches. We are creating a stillness strong enough to carry someone else's steps. So if one day you find yourself lost, not in a forest but in your own path, stop. Find a tree, stand beneath it. Let its shadow cover you. Let its stillness surround you. You do not need to go far to begin again. You only need to go deep. The tree has always known this, and now so do you. Because the trees that travelled without moving are all around us. They are in the hills and the valleys, in the streets and the parks, in the quiet memories of places we've loved. They did not go anywhere, but they are everywhere, rooted in place, reaching through time, reminding us that the longest journeys are not always measured in distance, but in how deeply we grow and how widely we give.